Alrighty, hello everyone, my name is Kids and welcome to another Korge video. Today I want to give a brief introduction to containers and then tell you about my mental model about how I think about containers, and maybe this will give you a better understanding of how containers work in Korge. So first let's just look at the documentation here and read what it says. So, container. A simple container of views. All the children in this container have an associated index that determines their rendering order. The first child is rendered first, and the last one is rendered last. So when children are overlapping with each other, the last child will overlap the previous ones. Then it's saying we have a bunch of different methods that we can use for accessing the children, and then a few methods for adding new children, and also there should be methods, if you look here, for removing children as well. So here, for example, is a visual diagram of what a container may look like. So here we have a container, then we have this children, which is basically just an array of different views and containers. So in this example, the first element is a solid rectangle, the second one is a circle, the third one is a container, and the fourth one is a UI button. Something to note is that a container can contain other containers as well. And the children containers can also contain their own containers or any other views that they have. Something to note, as you recall from the documentation, is that if the circle is actually rendering above the solid rectangle, or is rendered at the same position as the solid rectangle, then it will be rendered above it because it's second from the first index. So just remember that all subsequent children will be rendered on top of the previous children. Okay, so here is an example of what this may look like. So we have this thing here. So we have in Kotlin, it often uses a bunch of these extension functions, which are used basically to create whatever container that we have. Then it uses this add to method to basically add this child to the parent, to the array of the parent container itself. So we look at this add to, what it's doing is that the parent container is saying that it will add the child to its children array, and then it will apply the callback, so whatever you instantiated beforehand. So let's just go ahead and run this. So here, notice what we have is this container, which contains two rectangles. So we have a yellow rectangle, then we have a red rectangle, and then the red rectangle is centered on the first rectangle. So that's why it looks like this, right? Notice that the second rectangle is overlapping the previous one because it was added second, right? So again, with the extension functions, if you look at the solid rectangle, it's basically the same thing. Korge follows this very interesting pattern where it basically creates these helper inline functions for all the different UI components, so that you don't have to create the object first and then call this add to method. Instead, you just do solid rect, and then it will add the created component to the parent itself. So yeah, the other way that you could have done this is by doing, for example, solid rect like this. So we could have done the same thing. So 85, 85, and then the color equals colors dot yellow. So here's our first rectangle, rect1. Then we can have our second rectangle. So this is 50 by 50. And then what it's doing, what this extension function was doing, was that it adds itself to the parent. So the parent in this case would be the rect container itself. So we go ahead and comment this out, do this. We should get the same thing. Oh yeah, we need to center rect2 on rect1. So we can do that after. I think that's fine. Center on rect1. Oh, what happened here? Oh, okay. Both of them are yellow. That's why I need this to be red. So we run it. Then yeah, basically the same as what we saw earlier. So yeah, just remember that these functions here that you see are just extension functions which create the element, the underlying UI element for you, and then adds it to the parent. All right, so let's go ahead and go back to what we had previously. So notice here, I have a bunch of on-click listeners as well. So containers actually have this very interesting behavior. I'm not sure if it's documented anywhere, but basically, if I click on this, rect2 was clicked. Notice that only one of the on-click listeners was triggered. So if I click here, rect2, if I click here, rect1, then if I click outside, it says stage was clicked. Notice though that this rect container was clicked handler was not called. So I think what happens is that when you do when you add on-click listeners, it actually iterates backwards, because you want to trigger the topmost elements first, and then trigger the bottom elements last. So it iterates backwards, and if it sees that it triggers an on-click listener for one of these children, then it will just stop right there. So that's what we're seeing right here. Right, so the rectangle 2 was seen first, so then that is triggered, and then it just stops. Same with rec1. Notice that the rec container itself isn't clicked because both basically the rec2 basically encompassed the whole entire size of that container itself, which is why it doesn't get triggered, because rec2 will always be triggered in that case. Then yeah, the stage was clicked is when the stage itself was clicked. So the thing that contains everything in this little window here. All right, so yeah, that is something to note. Having a container affects the on-click listeners that you add, especially the on-click ones, in sometimes weird and interesting ways that you may not expect. So take that into account when you are programming your UI components and doing UI work. Okay. Yeah, basically that is all the information that you need to know. So if you look at like a bunch of other components that we have here, most of them are basically just containers that contain stuff. So for example, the UI scrollable, you see here it has the same pattern. It's generating that view, or that container, and then it's adding it to the children for the parent container. And yeah, it has some Kotlin stuff for running whatever block you give it. Alrighty, that is basically it. If you want to manipulate the DOM or manipulate the children, there are a bunch of different methods that you can use. So if you just look at here, there's some stuff for iterating through the children. There's some stuff for swapping the children as well, removing them. Yeah, just a bunch of different things. So always try to look at the documentation and see what you can do. Cool. Thanks for watching and have a good one. Bye.